Did Vikings really build houses out of turf seriously? It sounds like something from a cartoon, not a history lesson. But trust me, the story of how these seafaring explorers carved out lives in the frozen North Atlantic is wilder than you can imagine. Forget gleaming castles and grand palaces. This is a tale of mud, moss, and a whole lot of stubbornness. Let's start with the basics. Why did these Norse settlers, arriving centuries before anyone else, build their homes the way they did? It wasn't about style, it was about survival. Imagine a world where the ground is permanently frozen, where the wind howls like a banshee, and where every single degree matters. The answer, surprisingly, was simple: turf, mountains of it. Think of a longhouse, not the cozy, thatched roof kind you picture. This was a massive, rectangular structure, a fortress of earth and vegetation. Between 1,000 and 1,500 square meters of cut turf, that's a lot of grass, were needed to build the walls. It's like building a giant, living brick, and it worked. Even today in Greenland, you can still see these enormous turf cuttings, ghostly reminders of the Vikings' incredible engineering feat. It wasn't just a building material, it was a shield against the elements, a way to trap the heat and create a surprisingly comfortable interior. But turf wasn't the only game in town. Peat, partially decayed vegetation, was another crucial resource. These settlers weren't just building homes, they were fueling their lives, forging tools, and keeping warm. Like the turf, peat cuttings are still visible across the landscape, a testament to the sheer scale of their operations. They weren't just building, they were mining the earth itself. Let's talk about the houses themselves. A typical Viking Age farm wasn't a single, imposing building. It was a sprawling complex, a little village of interconnected structures. There was the main house, of course, but also workshops, barns, and maybe even a smithy where the Vikings hammered out their swords and axes. And don't forget the thralls, the enslaved people who worked the land. They had their own quarters, adding to the complexity of the settlement. As time went on, these houses started to merge. The Vikings realized that the more space you had, the warmer it was. So they began combining buildings, creating these strange, modular structures, a bit like giant Lego sets built with turf and stone. It was a practical solution to a harsh environment, a way to maximize warmth and create a more comfortable living space. Now, let's shift our focus to Iceland. This island was different. Unlike the other North Atlantic colonies, Iceland never embraced a money-based economy. Instead, they relied on a complex system of trade, using goods like vaðmál, a coarse, heavy wool cloth, as currency. Imagine trying to buy a cow with a piece of fabric. It was a unique system, but it worked, allowing Iceland to thrive despite its isolation. This reliance on trade also meant that Iceland was constantly connected to the outside world. The sagas, those epic tales of Viking adventures, are filled with journeys to Norway, despite the political tensions. It was a risky business, but the rewards were worth it. Icelanders were traders, explorers, and let's be honest, sometimes ruthless warriors. But let's be clear, life in Iceland wasn't a fairy tale. The sagas are filled with stories of feuds, betrayals, and bloody battles. These weren't friendly village disputes, these were wars fought over land, wealth, and power. The Vikings of Iceland established a parliament, the Alþingi, where laws were made and disputes were settled. It was a radical idea for the time, a move towards self-governance. But even this parliament was plagued by infighting and political maneuvering. Imagine a gathering of chieftains arguing and plotting, their fate hanging in the balance. It's a dramatic scene, and it's all documented in the sagas. These conflicts eventually led to the downfall of the Icelandic Republic, as Norway stepped in to take control. It was a sobering reminder that even the most advanced societies can be undone by internal strife. Then there were the outlaws, the men in net, the men without land. These were the rebels who had been banished from society. They often sought refuge in remote caves and valleys, becoming legendary figures in Icelandic folklore. The sagas are filled with tales of these outlaws, their daring exploits, and their violent deaths. They were the dark side of the Viking story, the reminder that not everyone lived by the code. Let's travel west to Greenland. The Vikings didn't just settle in Iceland, they pushed further, venturing into the icy wilderness of Greenland. But Greenland wasn't the paradise they'd hoped for. It was a harsh, unforgiving land, and the early settlements struggled to survive, but the Vikings were determined to make it work. They built farms, raised livestock, and hunted seals and walruses. They adapted to the environment, using every resource available to them. And they built their houses, again, with turf, creating surprisingly comfortable homes in the middle of the Arctic. The archaeological record at Hofstadr, a Viking settlement in northern Iceland, is astonishing. It's like stepping back in time. You can see the imprints of furniture, the curving scrape of doors, and even the animal bones that tell a story of feasts and sacrifices. This wasn't just a village, it was a center of religious ritual, a place where the Vikings honored their gods and celebrated their victories. But Hofstadr was more than just a religious site. It was a trading post, a hub of activity. Archaeologists have found evidence of specialized butchery, suggesting that the Vikings were preparing meat for feasts. They were even feeding their pigs trout, a rare and expensive delicacy. It's a testament to their ingenuity and their determination to thrive in a challenging environment. And then there's the story of the sacrifices. The Vikings of Hofstadr regularly killed bulls and decorated the walls of their hall with their skulls. It was a ritualistic practice, a way to honor the gods and ensure a bountiful harvest. Imagine a hall filled with the skulls of dozens of bulls, a truly impressive sight. Let's talk about the sagas. These epic tales of Viking adventure are a cornerstone of Icelandic culture. They are filled with heroes, villains, and everything in between. The characters in the sagas are larger than life, and their stories are filled with drama, violence, and romance. But how reliable are the sagas? Are they accurate accounts of what really happened, or are they embellished stories told over generations? The answer, as always, is complicated. The sagas were written down centuries after the events they describe, and they were shaped by the writer's own biases and agendas. However, they are also remarkably detailed, and they provide a wealth of information about Viking society, culture, and beliefs. Take Odd the Deep-Minded, for example. She's a widow who captained her own ship and traveled to Orkney, the Faroes, and Iceland. She was a warrior, a leader, and a pioneer. Or Flosi Thordarson, who burned his enemies in their hall and then listened to poetry as they burned. Or Gudrun Osvifistadr, who went through 4 marriages and ultimately declared, "I was worst to the one I loved the most." These are not just characters in a story, they are real people with real lives and real struggles. And then there's Grettir Asmundarson, the outlaw anti-hero who fought the undead man Glam. He was a complex and contradictory figure, a villain and a hero, a symbol of defiance and rebellion. The sagas are more than just stories, they are a window into the Viking mindset. They reveal a society that valued courage, loyalty, and honor. But they also reveal a society that was prone to violence, betrayal, and revenge. Finally, let's consider the story of the Norse settlement in North America, Vinland. Around 1000 AD, Vikings led by Leif Erikson landed on the coast of what is now Newfoundland, Canada. They established a small settlement, but it didn't last. The harsh environment combined with internal conflicts led to the settlement's demise, but the story of Vinland is important. It shows that the Vikings were capable of exploring and settling new lands. It's a reminder that the Viking Age was a time of great discovery and adventure, so there you have it. The story of the Vikings in the North Atlantic is a story of survival, adaptation, and resilience. It's a story of mud and moss, of feuds and sacrifices, of heroes and villains. It's a story that continues to fascinate and inspire us today. But one final question remains: did these Vikings really build houses out of turf? And more importantly, are we truly ready to understand the full, complicated truth of their incredible journey?